In this episode, we're talking about strategies on how to budget when choosing a school and while in school. Let's think about how much money is coming in and what is going out.
This is The Hidden Critique, where we discuss art, race, and higher education at the intersection of an MFA. I'm Marlon Tobias, pronouns he, him.
And I'm Krystle and Lemonias, pronouns she, her.
Welcome to our show.
All right, so we talk about money today, Chris.
Yes, dollar bills.
Give us all the money, but not just give us all the money, but now that we have all the money, now we got to figure out how to spend the money. So when we're in grad school, we're still not broke.
Well, we are considered working poor, but let's still try to live within our means to the best of our capacity.
I definitely agree with those sentiments. And yeah, just ready to get into this. But before we start, because mental health is important in life, especially when you're living that artist entrepreneur lifestyle, which we are doing. And it is not easy, but we are making the absolute most and best out of it while having a good time. Chris, how is your heart?
My heart is feeling grateful for all the knowledge that I have gathered and my capacity to use it in ways that supplements my success and the success of those around me. How's your heart, Marlon?
My heart is in a place of abundance. And it's more so of an affirmation of abundance because I'm not sure if I shared this, but I just recently moved to Chicago. My partner got a job to help us collectively. But what that did for me, because I'm not a native of the Midwest, I'm an East Coast. I was born and raised in New York. And then I spent the last 15 years in Florida, been with my partner for 7 years. We actually met in Florida. My family, my network is on the East Coast. So there's a lot of rebuilding that I am having to do. And in this moment, I have to remind myself that I still create abundance and I still am abundant. And I am one of abundance, and I spill abundance, and I share abundance, and I attract abundance. So it's a practice that I am doing in this time, which is very much needed as I not only kind of rebuild my life, but also build upon my art career, which is two different things that are happening in tandem. And in moments like this, in order to keep my spirits up. And it's interesting we're talking about budgeting money and everything in this episode because I did work in sales in the past life. And one of the number one rules when working in sales, especially direct sales, is maintaining your attitude and making sure that you have a good attitude because a good attitude attracts goodness. So I am filling my heart and affirming my heart in abundance to attract abundance. Yes.
Awesome. I love that.
Wonderful. All right. So, but yeah, in regard to money in college, being a college student, let's just face it, is not easy. It never has been easy. You're balancing academics, you're balancing a social life, building a social life. Sleep is tough. Like, I don't even know if that is, sleep is just not a thing when you're in college, right?
Yeah, it really isn't.
And worrying about finances can make college even harder, right? So the best way to financially prepare yourself for the school year or for your time matriculating through college is to have a plan for your money. And I think that is something that is loosely discussed, but not discussed from the point of where you are on the positive end of money, right? Or how you can control this thing called money, even when possibly working with a little bit of money.
Yes, and I would even add that to strategically navigate not having much money in a way that expands your capability to do things that supports you today and in the future. Because oftentimes we think when you don't have a lot of money, that means that you can't do much of anything. But there is still a lot that can be done within your means that still can put you at zero, because let's be honest, most people leave education minus zero
Negative, yeah.
and the negative. And so the goal is to, if it's possible, to make that investment as minimal as possible and get closest to zero, that you are starting off a life that is not burdened by the debt that you'll have to eventually pay off. And we can do that with some strategic planning.
Definitely. So, but before we get into some ways that you can do that, we should definitely share our financial situation in grad school and how we did that. So for me, going into grad school, I did not receive a scholarship from my institution. And I'll be honest, I was still in a mindset of a deficit a little bit. So that probably, and how your thoughts really do determine your reality in a lot of ways. And I think post grad school, I'm looking at money a lot differently, especially now that I know the full scope of what it means to be an artist in the 21st century. So I had to take out loans. And I did try to apply for some scholarships, but I just didn't get them. So I applied for loans, but also luckily I, was with my partner at the time, and we had pretty much built a household together. And he was still working, and he agreed to supplement a little bit more to make ends meet and to make sure that we were still comfortable as I pursue my advanced degree. So money was based off of that, the loan, and then, also what my partner was able to contribute to the household.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that in itself was such a privilege, but I'm sure you're so grateful because so many people do not, especially Black people, don't have someone that is really supporting them in that capacity going through school. For me, I'm not an international student, but I might as well could be, even though I've been in this country for as long as I have. I had a late start after I adjusted my status in this country and was even able to afford an education. I worked throughout my entire undergrad experience and was fortunate to have gotten scholarships through undergrad enough to pay for my entire undergrad experience. But then starting grad school, I knew that I would have no support in terms of financially from parents or any family members. So, and I knew that I couldn't afford the cost of potentially having a debt coming out of school just because I had no idea what the potential of my degree would gather. So to mitigate that, I worked intensively for a year and a half prior to grad school and was able to put aside some money. I was able to save about $4,000, which was what I took with me to school, but I also foot the bill of moving myself to Florida and gathering all that I needed. I even went as far as looking for an apartment while I was in New Jersey. And I rented the place that I was going to live in and negotiated with my landlord how much my rent would increase while I was there. So going into my apartment, I knew for the 3 years that I wouldn't have had an increase in my rent. I knew that I had put down my security and all of that to secure where I was going to live. I knew that I had a budget to at least make it through the first semester, and I intended to find work at some capacity while I was there. I even went as far as interviewing and got a job before I moved, a job in which I didn't end up doing once I arrived. I chose to do something else. But because of my family's background, we didn't have much. We didn't have much at that point, and the uncertainty of not having anything in a place where I didn't know anybody was even that much more scary. So I had to do so much planning because I had no intention of coming to America and at some point being on the street. I could have been on the streets in my own country. It's not going to happen here. And so, and so I really strategically planned for that move once I realized that's where I was going to be.
Nice. So we're definitely coming at this from different ways of how we made grad school work financially.
Yeah.
So, and I think what was definitely important coming from your story was understanding that you're going to another state. So you're coming from the north, going down into the south. And what's important to understand, or I think what would be important to consider or look into or research when you're budgeting is the cost of living in that particular state.
Yes, absolutely. We really took some time to look into what does it cost to live in various places in the US? And it's really interesting to see that, I mean, there's a lot of things to consider when you're moving to a place.
Yeah.
So when you're thinking about cost of living in a particular state, I like to look at what rent costs in that state, because rent is usually your largest expense in your household. And that is what you need to always be able to pay to keep a roof over your head. And so something that I did in comparing the two institutions that I had offers for and who I was choosing between was how much was average rent in those places. In Florida, where the institution was that we both attended, rent in that state is average $1,779. And in comparison to New York, which was the other school that I had an offer for, where the average rent is actually $1,695. However, there's other expenses that's quite more. So I also considered health, which I don't have a link or resource to give you comparison of that, but I know that healthcare in New York is way more expensive than healthcare in Florida, which is something that you can look up on your own. But because of that, the expense of healthcare would have outweighed the savings of potentially moving to New York. So with that in considerations, which is what made it so important for me to negotiate what my cost of living was going to be. So I'll tell your story, Marlon. I may not have shared this in detail with you before. So initially, when I was looking at moving to Florida, I got on this school website within the institution. They offered a portal where you can put a profile and find a roommate. And so I found a roommate 3 months prior to moving to Florida, and then proceeded to find an apartment with this roommate. Or roommate situation, we actually did like roommate dating where we had like,
come on, Tinder for roommates.
Right? We had calls where we kind of asked each other questions about how we like to live, how we like maintaining our space, like what things annoy us. Like we had like 3 or so conversations to gauge that, and then we would also text back and forth, and we just put it all out on the table because, mind you, this was someone that you would be living with in your in a space, and then lo and behold, they had the pandemic. So I had to share space with this person for a lot of time. So imagine not have taken the time to do this. I could have been stuck in a space with someone that I didn't really
crazy
care
person
for, right? And so I did that, found a great roommate, which I still considered a good friend, and found a place through, I started reaching out to current students and asking them where they lived. So within the art department, the students that I connected with on a visit, I asked them where they're living. Do they have openings, spaces that I could look into? And one student had a place that they knew was open. And so right away I was actually still in New Jersey. I did WhatsApp messaging and then also video called with the person, saw virtually the place, also had this roommate that I had found, joined the call, looked at the place. 2 months before I moved to Florida, boom, apartment set. And within that conversation, when I said I would take the place, gave upfront because I had savings, I had put down my security deposit, the first month's rent, signed the contract, asking for them to also keep or rent at the same price throughout the time that I would be in that school.
So you were able to also negotiate the cost of the stability of the rent,
yes,
of your rent.
Yes. I was able to.
Amazing.
But that is rare. And I think that only happened because I was not dealing with a large development. This was a mom and pop. This was a person that they had a few apartments in a condo space, and they just wanted to make sure that they had occupancy. And so I could guarantee 3 years of occupancy, and they were okay with that. But fast forward, in my last year, my roommates program was only 2 years, so they moved out and continued on with their life, and I had to find another roommate for the other room that would have been open. And so the person that ended up getting that room, not only because of at that point the family had moved into having a management manage the condos that they owned, the management shot up the price of the rent. They honored my particular agreement, but my roommate, who, mind you, had the smaller room, was paying $700 for a room that previously cost $575. Can you imagine?
Oh my God. The power of negotiation, though. The power of negotiation.
Again, it came into full circle. And so if I did not have that foresight, I probably still would have been able to afford my rent, but I would be pulling from money that I really couldn't quite afford at that point, because my last year, I was able to get an opportunity to have a full-time position, but my savings wouldn't have been as padded as it was upon leaving.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, because that's $200 extra a month.
Yes.
And every dollar counts when you are in school.
Every penny. In Jamaica, we have a saying, every mickle make a muckle. And that means every penny adds up to more and more and more.
I love it. But that, again, that just shows everything is up for negotiation. And when doing business, it's important to come to the table every time, every single time. So even talking about supplementing income, or even that concept, for me in grad school, especially coming from a full-time job with benefits, just the concept of supplementing an income was a very overwhelming concept for me. And it's interesting because once you're in it, and then also through having talks with you and understanding these are ways that you can supplement your income without it interfering with your studies, which is the main reason why you're there,
Yeah.
really allowed me to change my perception of what that looks like.
Yeah.
So one thing that I learned, and this was later on in our tenure as grad students, was that there are a lot of schools that allow you to adjunct after a year of your teaching experience in grad school. So for our
Huh.
so for our program, how it worked is the first year we served as TAs,
Mm-hmm.
and then the following year we served as instructors on record. So we were the instructors. And what that gave us was a year of teaching experience.
Hmm.
So what you can do at that point is you can take that experience and apply to other schools to adjunct for more classes. So
Wow.
yeah, and hopefully, these are classes that you're already teaching anyway. So, in our case, art, in my case specifically, drawing and painting, I could go
Mm-hmm.
to another neighboring school that is looking for a drawing and painting professor, or adjunct rather, looking for a or painting adjunct, and I could teach a class or two there. And
Mm.
for me, that's a less overwhelming or intimidating concept because I'm already doing this at um and I'm already doing this at this one institution, that I'm
Yeah.
already following this curriculum at this one institution.
Mm-hmm.
So I can just apply this and fit this in without it taking too much time and without also taking too much mental space or having to reconfigure my mental space into something else. This is all associated with the subject of art. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what kind of lessened my anxiety in regard to supplementing income.
That is interesting for you that it gave some anxiety because coming from Jamaica, Jamaicans always have two and three positions.
Right.
We're always doing something. Your main source of income is never just the thing alone you will be doing. And so I'm coming from a background where like my family will always be in multiple different types of employment. And so for me, having an additional source of income has always been a way to create more stability.
Mm,
And that, like you've mentioned, does not have to be this source of lots of work that takes you right out of your realm. And so finding work that was hybrid while we were in school was essential. And that's where we started working with our union that had positions that were looking for organizers to advocate on behalf of students like ourselves. That became an employment that became a career. It gave me my first working opportunity while I was full time working in grad school and then after, and gave me so much knowledge and skills for the work world that I would not have gained just being in my program. And it pertained to in the themes that I was interested in my work because I talk a lot about equity. I talk a lot about inclusion in my practice. I am really interested in the laws on labor. And so it was a no-brainer for me to get involved in that capacity with our union. And yeah, I learned so much from that experience and it supplemented my income throughout that and a few other things were one of the main ways I was able to get through our grad program without incurring any debt.
definitely. And also thinking about another form of supplemental income. Let's say you don't make scholarships, you can still apply for grants and fellowships. And
Yes.
that is, I would say, 1,000% aligned with what we're trying to do as artists. Because as artists, um, professional artists, we have to continue to apply for grants and fellowships. And there's one website that you actually introduced me to, Chris, callforentry.org.
Oh,
And
okay.
that is, I think every artist at any level should sign up to that website, create an account, because what that is it's basically a depository of shows you can apply to, but you'll also be able to find grants, fellowships, residencies, local, national, and international. And of course, they offer, these opportunities for you. But what that also does by utilizing this resource is it gets you really in the habit of looking for these opportunities, but it does it in such an easy way. And a lot of these grants and fellowships, there's no application fee. So
Mm-hmm.
you just apply and you're pretty much, taking your portfolio that you're already building or that you have already built. You're taking your artist statement that you learned or that you crafted already in class, and you're using this in real world scenarios in a
Yeah,
real world way. So callforentry.org is definitely a website I would definitely suggest getting acquainted with in your artist journey, but in particular as a grad student when you're trying to make money make sense and trying to get your art
absolutely.
out there, which is
And
the
get
main
your art
thing.
out there.
Yeah.
Yes. I think I want to take a moment to define what are grants and or fellowships. These things, grants and fellowships, provides funds that can be used to pay for your rent, other expenses, allowing for artists to work full time, to be creative. It's usually grants are generally very competitive, and the amount awarded and stipulations around each grant is can be different. Application procedures vary widely across the spectrum. Oftentimes fellowships comes with are longer and comes with possibly a little bit more stipulations than some grants, but they can look like the same thing and sometimes a little different. And some are given to allow an artist to complete a specific proposed project. Others are unrestricted. Some are rewarded strictly based on need, others as a prize given out as a part of a competition, and some are open to application, others are only by nomination and invitation. So it's awards a broad spectrum as to how grants and fellowships work, but they count as actually money earned. Something that I read on candid.org is I found it quite funny. It actually shared on their website that census data reveals that there are about 1.4 million artists, working artists in the US. And this is defined by people whose primary earnings come from their art, and this includes grant money. That said, their median earnings in 2012 were around $30,000 a year and $36,000 with a bachelor's degree. Then they stipulate there are a number of ways for artists to supplement their income and ease the financial burden that comes with being a working artist. Although most foundation grants are given to nonprofit organizations, artists are one exception to that rule. So I thought it was kind of comical because they are letting you know from the get-go that you're about to be poor and we expect you're going to be poor,
We
possibly,
expect you to be
unless you.
poor.
And so you are an exception to who we know is going to need a handout. I wouldn't even say a handout. They're going to need supplemental ways to support your practice. And so donations is encouraged for these individuals. And, that goes to saying that you really have to do a lot of maneuvering and figuring out how is this going to work for you, because the averages speak for itself that if you don't have a clear understanding of what you are trying to do throughout your education and your professional development through your education, you can come out with a tight hold on an empty sack.
Mm.
because you if you don't know what you're going to do, it's not going to come by osmosis as to what it is you're going to be capable of doing when you actually leave. So unless you try multiple things, broaden your expertise, and have many skills that you can pull from after the fact, you're going to have a hard time. It's going to be quite challenging. And that's why oftentimes so many artists are not able to sustain a practice. And your whole goal is to have a long-term art practice. You want your work to be shown. You want your work to be in spaces that can be used, whether educationally, but then also collected by whether individuals or institutions. So this is something to really consider.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned that too, because it seems like the more, I guess, adaptable you are, or the more you have different things going on, the more attractive you look in the art world, and the more attractive your CV looks. So that gives you the opportunity to do more projects, maybe have more gallery representation, because the great thing about being an artist is that you don't have to be confined to just one gallery. You can be represented by multiple galleries,
even just having formal relationships of working with multiple galleries. It doesn't always have to mean representation. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, definitely. So that all really, by having all of these different ways of making money, it also just naturally forces you to kind of stretch your creativity in different ways and in different directions to make things make sense. Yeah,
absolutely.
And I kind of want to go back, because you talked about how another way to supplement your income was taking on certain jobs that also aligned with your art practice, and specifically targeting certain opportunities and jobs that align with your art practice to make money. And when you do that, I think alignment is very important. I think being in alignment is absolutely pivotal in understanding how to move gracefully and with low stress. And as an artist, especially an artist that are tackling certain themes, that opens you up to be an advocate in some ways, and to find organizations that practice that form of advocacy. So like you said, we both actually, during our tenure in grad school, got involved in the union. And our artwork in so many ways addresses and discusses equity and inclusion and diversity in some ways. So what we were able to do was to really seamlessly take what we were already researching and already passionate about, and funnel that also into our work with the union. And it really became a mutually beneficial experience for both of us, because as we were practicing our advocacy, we also sought inspiration from the work that we were doing, which made our work that much more stronger, more potent, and more relevant to what's going on in the world today. So when thinking about, and this was just us trying to, our efforts to make ends meet, right?
Yeah.
So it can kind of snowball into something a lot bigger and grander, more beneficial and more impactful by doing that, by finding those jobs and opportunities that align with your overall mission and theme as a creative.
Yeah. Something else that I did in search of funds was I would apply to exhibitions that offered cash prizes. And because I had a very active studio practice, I came to grad school with tons of ideas that I intended to explore and ready to make work to start showing. I was able to apply to shows that offered top prizes and often winning those top prizes, and that supplementing my household income. So it killed two birds with one stone. I was able to pay my rent. I was able to feed myself and pay my bills while I was able to get my work out there.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
through that exposure, that led me and then led you to opportunities. We had opportunities of mentorship, mentoring other students, and then having income from that. Mind you, small income, but it all adds up. Then that led to another opportunity of you coordinating an art program. You should share a bit about that, Marlon. Tell us.
Yeah, so that was a really great experience actually, and it's just interesting how everything kind of built on top of the next, right? So in grad school, through working with our union, and also we, along with another grad student, built a mentorship program within our program that gave me the experience and the qualifications to take on a project post grad where I served as a coordinator for a internship program. So this internship program, to also talk about its alignment, there are a lot of educational components as well. So also in grad school, I started to kind of get the teaching bug as well. And there were teaching elements as far as professional and teaching professional development in this internship program. And the students in particular, it was a group of about 5 college students who had interest in making careers in art management, in different forms of art management. So if it wasn't for the work that I did and the experience that I garnered in grad school, along with going to grad school and, trying to find ways to make supplemental income, it actually benefited me post grad with being qualified to take on these roles. And by getting this role, just moving forward, I was able to network with that community and city that I was in. And, going back to how, working within alignment, I was able to connect with people that offered me the opportunity to exhibit work there. With
Yes.
another organization, I was able to connect with another organization that gave me the opportunity to exhibit. So now I not only have income, and I'm not only gaining more experience under my belt working as this coordinator, I'm not only just incorporating the educational component to this professional development program, but I'm also making money, and I'm also continuing my art practice. And these are the ways that you work your ecosystem, you work your art ecosystem in particular.
Just to add a little bit to that, I think it's imperative to be a self-starter in your grad program, because projects that you start, you spearhead, you make work for yourself, it in itself start to give you the credibility to take on the projects of others, and that why others will employ you.
Right, exactly. So it's interesting. The more people see the work you're doing by yourself, the more they're apt to help you, which is definitely, it's an interesting thing that happens with people. They see you doing something and they want to be a part of it in some ways. And some of those ways is giving you your next opportunity.
Yes, absolutely. And that brings us to the next point, where really consider to take advantage of government assistance if you need it.
Right.
As I mentioned at the top of this episode, most GAs are not paid a living wage. And so across the country, we are considered the working poor.
Right.
We are often not making enough to cover our expenses, which is why so many students have the support of family, or they have the support of the government to get them through. So
Yeah.
we have put together a few resources at the bottom of our description in our page for you to take advantage as you need it. While I was in grad school, I was not making much money, enough to get by and able to cover my expenses, but I utilized the food banks that were in our area, and that was a way for me to supplement my food necessities each month. And it was pivotal for me to not incur debt and I don't have any shame in it because it's there. We pay our taxes. So,
Exactly.
we should take advantage of these services where you need it. And so we've inserted a link into the show notes, Feeding America, which you can find your local food bank. And we've also made available a link, which is a program, College Snaps Project, where you can access food stamps and utilize these services as you need it.
Yeah, I mean, when all else fails and your art's not doing what it needs to do, and you're not getting your scholarships, and you're not getting grants, and you didn't win that art prize,
Yes.
at the end of the day, you're still a student, which means you qualify for government assistance.
Yes.
So Chris, you utilize the food banks. I utilize the SNAP. I utilize food
Mm-hmm.
stamps. And one of the websites, Chris, you mentioned, it actually provides you with a map of the country. And if you click on that country, it will give you
Oh, you mean
more
the States?
details. Yeah, the state. Sorry, it will give you details on how each state qualifies their college students on how to receive SNAP benefits. So I would definitely, there are some states that I think they're still getting information on, but I know the state that we were in, you were able to qualify for SNAP benefits. So I applied for it, and that was an extra bit of income that I was able to utilize to feed myself.
Right. And
Um,
something to note that if for international students that are Black and brown of color and looking for support in that capacity, food banks don't ask for anything in regards to your legal status or your ability to earn income in this country. So you can go to a food bank and be served in, just almost like a supermarket. You go in and get the food that you need and you come out. So this is a service a resource that everyone can access.
Definitely. And I think with all of this information, it just also goes to show the power of networking across. I remember listening to an interview that had Issa Rae, and she talked about the importance of networking across and how that played a pivotal role in her progression throughout her career. Because all of this information that we have, Chris, you and I shared with each other.
Right.
And there were things that maybe might have not have been a good fit for us, but would have been a perfect fit, or not have been a good fit for one of us that was a perfect fit for another.
Mm-hmm.
So just keeping and massaging those relationships, not only with people that are ahead of you in their career, but also that people are in the same level within your career, and putting as many minds together, and not being afraid to share resources and opportunities, and also being humble enough to understand that maybe this isn't an opportunity for me, but it'll be perfect for you. And the opportunity that is made for me will come to me at the right time. And as we continue to foster this relationship, now it's not just maybe you doing well, but now it's multiple parties doing well, and we're both lifting each other up, and we're both making sure that we're well informed, and we're both making sure that we understand all of the resources that we have available to us. So along with doing the research of understanding what the cost of living is in your state, and calculating your own break even, and finding some different ways to supplement your income, it's also very important to network across, or network period, but in particular network across, because your network is also your net worth.
Absolutely. And what is for you is for you. You have to think in abundance as we started the episode.
Yeah, see how that all came back full circle? I love that. I love that.
Right.
And
Look at us now.
that
Look
was
at us
so
doing this together.
unintentional. That was so unplanned. I loved it. I love it.
Right.
right, so it's that time again where now we want to hear from you, the listener. Join us on our Discord, the link found in our show description, to share your thoughts on these two questions. One, for current and post-MFA graduates, how did you budget to cover your expenses for school? And two, while in school, did you take on additional jobs or projects to supplement your income? If so, did they align with your art practice? Money can be overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be.
Planning with intention can alleviate future stress and allow you to focus on developing your art practice, which is your main goal.
Well, all right, guys, until next time.
Thank you for listening to our episode. The Hidden Critique is produced and hosted by us, Krystle Lemonias and Marlon Tobias. Episodes are edited by Kirsten Pettifor. Original music composed by Cesar Presa.
If you like the show, you can review and rate this podcast via Spotify or Apple Podcasts. You can also like, subscribe, and comment on our YouTube page.
For exclusive bonus content, subscribe to our Patreon at The Hidden Critique.
Or join the Hidden Critiques Discord page to engage directly with us, the host, and build community with fellow listeners.